Because I am better.
At what?
Everything.
Promised Neverland ended last week, and as I was reading the final pages, I contemplated why I was so reminiscent of it, why I was so sad to see it go, and the impact that it made on me as a person. You see, when I think about stories that made me react emotionally, made me excited for another chapter, made me jump out of my seat, Promised Neverland did all of that for me. And it made me realize that there's a fine line between enjoying a series and being immersed in one. Because I might have enjoyed Demon Slayer, but I wouldn't say it's great from start to finish. That it fails to continually grab your attention and making you want to read and watch more. But Promised Neverland does that. It continues to suck you in and make you feel a part of the story. And if you think about it, Promised Neverland and Demon Slayer are quite similar stories, all the way to the very end. The authors used nearly the exact same formula when making their stories, and yet Demon Slayer is so forgettable compared to Promised Neverland. What drives the story is the same. In the case of Tanjiro, the protagonist of Demon Slayer, he builds the story by trying to save what's left of his family. While on the other hand, Emma, the central character of Promised Neverland, fights to protect her family from being eaten. Each going on their own personal training arcs, trying to change the system that so wronged them. A system that can and wants to kill them at every turn. But the entire time, they keep to that one desire and principle of selflessness to drive them to their goal. And so they train. And in the case of Emma, she begins to build her understanding of the world that she had no idea existed to gain any advantage she can against her physically superior opponents. Tanjiro builds up his strength to be able to fight his opponents head on through just regular muscle training. Even into the very last arc, both of them face continuous battles where there are people who are sacrificed to defeat their story's incarnation of pure evil. They continually fight for so many chapters, and yet for some reason, Promised Neverland continues to suck you in while Demon Slayer becomes rigid and boring. The final chapters mean to get emotional through sacrifice, and yet Demon Slayer's losses didn't have the same effect.
Don't you care?
Nope. So what could make Demon Slayer's sacrifices mean so much less? And what makes Promised Neverland so much better? And I believe that this is all because of how the author portrays their enemies. Even though they are both fighting demons, the impact of their defeat means so much more in Promised Neverland. And in the case of Promised Neverland, even though they eat humans, they do so to survive, and in a sense they are no different from us. And because of that, you can find remorse for their enemies, as they are really people too. They have lives and purpose that they want to protect. Using these similarities, Emma tries to use compassion and understanding, sticking to her core principles. And yet Tanjiro evolves. Even though at first he tries to be compassionate and understanding of the demon enemies that have wronged him so, he accepts that he can't. And because of that, chooses to go back on his principles. And yet the author continues to try and push for some understanding from the reader to be sympathetic and empathetic towards Tanjiro's enemies, choosing to paint them as more human than what any Demon Slayer believes. This disconnect from the reader and the protagonist in a horror story is what breaks Demon Slayer. It is this disconnect that makes you unable to immerse yourself in the story, as you are no longer a part of it. You no longer feel the same things that the people of the story feel. Yet, Promised Neverland chooses to be true to its nature as a horror story, enabling readers to truly be immersed rather than disconnected, as you know just as much as the protagonist. It is a spiraling lack of empathy and sympathy towards his enemies that Tanjiro becomes the thing he swore to destroy, such that we no longer see him as a bright, colorful person who was so human. When Tanjiro is about to become a demon, he is still able to hold on to what little humanity has left, even though from every perspective he shouldn't be able to, because of just how much he lost. And because of that, the author wants us to take that leap of faith. But as readers, we can't. Tanjiro is no longer human.
I have failed you. From my point of view, the
Victims.
are evil. Well, then you are lost!
It is this loss in the ability to empathize with the characters of Demon Slayer that made it so uneventful when they died, making it impossible to immerse ourselves in someone who doesn't feel compassion and understanding. And this is clear by the author, who chooses to humanize the demons throughout the entire story, but decides not to include them in the reincarnation in the last chapter. Why show that they are human when you choose not to treat them as such? Well, on the other hand, Promised Neverland chooses to stick to that deep desire and drive to understand, elevating it far higher than Demon Slayer as a story.
Oh my God, you just say no